Okay, well, thank you to Mark Cripps from the Insurance Bureau of Canada for once again coming on to the 905er. Thankfully, I think we all left the recent recent 905 storm rather unscathed, but not so many of our neighbors, it turns out, were so lucky. And Mark, we thought it was important to have you on once again to kind of talk about what the realities of climate change are going to be for us in the 905 going forward, as this is not this doesn't look like it's going to be an isolated incident. It might be a bit of the new normal going forward. So, Mark, thank you very much for coming back on to enlighten our listeners about this state of affairs.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, it's a really important conversation, and I think the more that we do to sort of share the reality and the truths about what's happening and the economic impacts that come with this, maybe people will, get a better handle on the reality.
Like let's start off with stating the obvious. I think that like the insurance industry views what happened this week in July, Toronto, lots of areas in the 905, as a climate change event. That this is a factor of what climate change will produce in this part of the world. Is that a fair assessment of how the industry is viewing this?
Well, I think, Joel, the stats are really like I rely on stats, and I think that that's what's important. I mean, the numbers don't lie. This isn't just hyperbole. This isn't just kind of making this stuff up. Insurance is capital, and insurance is an important financial tool for resilience. So if you look at, for example, between 1984 and 1993, we had 20 natural disasters across Canada, right? The natural disasters are identified as an insured loss event that exceeds $30 million dollars. There were 7 that were related to water. Okay, now let's go to 94 to 2003. There were 39 catastrophic events, and 21 were water related. 04 to 2013, 67 catastrophic events, 31 were water related. And then the last, 10 decade, we've had 127 catastrophic events, of 40 of those were water related. So I don't know, like the numbers and they don't lie, and they're sending a clear signal that, climate change is causing our jet stream and our weather conditions to fluctuate dramatically and move in different patterns. And I think we're seeing some of that shift coming through the southern Ontario now, where we're getting these, look at the Derico storm that we had back in 2022. That was $1 billion nat cat loss event. Now that's a wind and rain event. We had the 2013 floods in Toronto, exactly the same event. A deluge of a lot of rain in a very short amount of time. And, we had over $1 billion in losses. And I can only guess, just based on inflation and, the cost to repair, and the fact that we now actually have a flood insurance product in the market, which kind of came out of the 2013 floods in Alberta and then Ontario. This is going to well exceed $1 billion from what I'm seeing. I mean, I can't predict what the final number will be, but this is going to be a big cat loss event. And, so I don't know what, it's not just another rainstorm. It's not just another windstorm. We have seen in the last 3 years, consecutive years of over $3 billion in catastrophic losses across Canada. That's never happened before. The only event that you can look back to, which was a single large event, was the Fort McMurray wildfires, where there was about $5.7 billion. But every year, 3 billion is the new norm. So, I mean, how do you go from, 400 million annually in the 80s to 3 billion now and not think that something is happening?
And yeah, I look at the front page of the Star today, and there's no mention. There's not a single mention of this. I mean, it's like old news. It's
Yeah.
already old news, and I feel like we're still not getting it. Burlington, where Joel and I are based in Burlington, so we tend to come back to it probably too often as an example. But this is now, there are homes that have been flooded multiple times. There are people who basically now live in constant fear of basement floodings, of major damage, and this is just a normal part of life now for those people. It used to be in Burlington, your main worry was trees getting blown down because there's a lot of trees. Trees are nothing compared with floods. And yet I don't see the government making saying we need to do something. I don't see the media putting pressure on anybody to this comes back to our need to drive cars, and also the kind of sprawl development that we've done over decades, isn't it? I mean, the kind of development that we've done.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. So I mean, we have not planned properly across this country, not just in Southern Ontario, but across this country. The planning has not, and part of the problem is that we don't have updated, accurate flood maps in this country. So, for example, like if I'm, if I want to buy a house, right, I should have access. My real estate agent should be able to access a database that says, hey, this house is located in a low-lying area. You have a much higher risk of a 1 in 25, a 1 in 50, 1 in 100-year flood. And you're likely going to either pay a higher insurance premium, or you may not be able to get insurance at all. And this is the reality of insurance, is that, like I said earlier, like flood insurance, overland flood insurance is an endorsement. It is not included in a standard insurance policy. So you have to buy it. Now, the price of that can range anywhere from $100 to $500, depending on the risk. In some cases, you may not be able to buy it at all, which is a really sad state that reflects the fact that we have just messed up planning, and we continue to make exactly the same mistakes. In Ontario, the current government has basically abandoned any notion of planning for these catastrophic weather events. They have basically said, developers run roughshod, do what you do, sprawl, sprawl, sprawl. Everybody wants a home in the suburbs with a white picket fence. That's what they want. Part of it is that's all developers want to build, because they don't have the, the gumption to, because that's where all their speculated land exists, right? So they want to cash in on those lands. But, we live downstream. I live in Hamilton, you live in Burlington, the people in Toronto, we all live downstream from an elevated province where all the water flows down to these increasingly populated areas, and it has nowhere to saturate. It has nowhere to go into the ground because it's all pavement. So, I think people in these areas, GTHA, should actually be rising up and saying enough's enough, and voting as a bloc to say, look, like, I don't know how we get people's attention here, because I think you said it perfectly, Roland. It's already old news. Holy shit, it's already old news. Like, this is what we see every day. As someone who works in this industry, works in communications, the media come rushing to ask for the gritty, dirty details of what this is going to be, and then they're on to the next story. And
and that's just it. Like, I've gone online to, after this latest event happened, I went online to see how people were doing in my neck of the woods, and everybody, I do find it's funny, they're all white men have kind of come in and said, oh, we need to up that carbon tax, right? It's all that Trudeau's fault. And it's like, I was sitting going, you guys are not you're not connecting these dots, and you're feeding into the propaganda of, oh, that it's, the carbon tax is, and you can question it all you want. You can talk about its effectiveness, fair enough, but it's clear not enough attention is being made to climate change as a whole and what the actual effects of it are going to be on the 905, and that there's this public disconnect between this event and climate change. Like people just no, it's just a one freak rainstorm. But as you said, Mark, like we're looking at $3 billion damage is now the new norm. How sustainable is that for an economy? Like how do you build, how do you sell people houses, $3 million homes in an area that's going to sustain $3 billion worth of damage annually?
I mean, I think we live in, those comments, I see them too, and they're, it's typical. People are just in denial. And I feel like politicians are hamstrung to deal with this issue because it becomes so polarized. There's a vocal minority of people who seem to get all the airwaves these days in their denialism. And then politicians, look, it's not a matter of like, can we stop this? It's a matter of how can we adapt to it, because this is only going to increase in frequency and severity in the years to come. But the problem is that, the type of infrastructure and the type of investment needed to adapt isn't sexy. It's underground. It's not something you can cut a ribbon on, and it's going to require like massive capital from both levels of government and the municipal government, and that all comes in the form of taxation. Or you have to divert priorities from something else to this. But if we don't adapt, like when it comes to insurance, for example, like, we are driven, insurers buy insurance. Like a lot of people don't know this, but like, I mean, insurers rely on reinsurers, right? Because of these, then they may not have the capital for one single large event. So they buy reinsurance. In 2020, because of the increasing losses in the reinsurance market, reinsurers pulled back capacity. And they got the capital pulled out of the reinsurance market, which is a huge signal should be a huge signal to everyone that when you can't even get capital to invest in the insurance market, that's a big signal that climate change and the events and the catastrophic events that are happening across the globe, it's not just here, but across the globe, are adding up to a point where we are going to hit a breaking point. And you see, like in some states down in Florida, Louisiana, California, you've seen insurers pull right out of the market because they can't, because it's overregulated. The losses are too high. They're unsustainable. And then you get these public government, backed insurance agencies that are now going bankrupt. They can't, and especially in Florida, where a home insurance policy in Florida is like over $5,000 on average. We complain here that my home insurance policy went up $100. Like, what's going on? That's nothing compared to what's likely going to happen if we don't adapt, change, recognize climate change as a monetary issue. This is an affordability issue. And, to all those, blowhards that are like, oh, it's just a rainstorm, carbon tax, with their sarcasm. I mean, when it hits them in the wallet, they're the first people that will complain about the fact that their insurance policy went up. Like, get a grip.
Well, yeah, I mean, ironically, in Burlington, the neighborhoods that tend to get hit hardest are some of the wealthiest.
Yeah.
They're the single family homes, generously sized in South Burlington amongst the trees. I mean, I'm not saying North Burlington wasn't affected too, it was, but you would think, well, I actually know, I mean, just from my own personal experience, that in 2014, after the sort of the major once in a century flood that we had then, just 10 years ago,
Yeah.
that a bunch of people who were involved in those floods subsequently became involved in local politics, became volunteers, or decided to get involved because of what had happened. So maybe this will activate the kind of middle class the bourgeoisie to get their asses into gear. But um, it seems to be too little and too slow to happen. I mean, it's infuriating. Like you said, the disconnect between people wanting to drive their trucks. Like I say, there's nothing about climate change on the front page of the Star today, but there is a story saying Ford bringing truck production to Oakville in 2026. Future of EVs at the plant unclear. Well, we can guess. Ford has no interest in EVs because trucks are what sell. Yep, we're having a climate emergency. There's no question at the end of that statement, but other than my what do you think about my extreme frustration with the world?
Well, I think I think I mean I live that same level of frustration every day, and I often say to people when I have this conversation that I've lost faith in politicians addressing climate change. I think they just, like I said, I think they're too weak-kneed, and that populism is just too high right now, and denialism and that segment of our society has been given the vocal cords right now to drive public policy. So I rely on, I'm a center person. I can be center right, center left, but I kind of live right in the center, and I believe in capitalism, and I believe in capital markets, and this is where I come to, like, it's not going to be, I don't think politicians are ever going to solve this crisis. I think it's going to be capital, and capital is going to send signals to people, and it's going to impact their wallet. And then when it starts to hit them directly in the wallet, right? Because you got to remember, these events, everybody runs away from them because if you didn't get hurt. But think about it. There are people in Toronto, Burlington, Mississauga, Kitchener right now who are sucking up water out of their basements. They're living this firsthand. And then they're going to have to deal with the insurance company and the frustrations that may come with that when they realize that they probably, or hopefully they do, but some of them will not have coverage. And then this is going to become an economic issue for them in terms of tens of thousands of dollars to repair the damage coming out of their own pocket. So, that kind of thing, those signals from the market, like we already see that. Like we get questions every week about why are insurance premiums going up. And it's really hard to, you sit back and you think, well, what are you missing? Like what are you missing? Why are auto insurance premiums going up? We have an auto theft crisis right now. Cars are being stolen all over the place. Why do you think this is happening? We have natural disasters every year, flooding, hail. We just had $1 billion, hail events are now $1 billion in Alberta. We've had 3 in a row over the last 4 years, like each one at $1 billion. Why are my insurance premiums going up? Flooding, fires. We had all those we've already forgot about the wildfires from last year. Like, holy crap. Like that was one of the, biggest it was the largest wildfire event, and we're not done. People think, oh, we're getting off easy. They're bubbling up. The temperatures are changing. The heat is coming to BC and Alberta. You have a place like Nova Scotia, which never had these kinds of large scale rain. Yes, hurricanes, absolutely hurricanes, but not these atmospheric rivers that are now. Who ever talked about atmospheric rivers before? Like, I mean, these are literally clouds that have become rivers that basically form, that are forming because of the jet stream and the warming temperatures, and then dumping a deluge. So you've had two flooding events in the same area in Nova Scotia consecutive years, and both of them have led to fatalities. So what is it going to take? Is it good? I don't know. This is why I've lost faith in people or politicians to solve this problem. I think it's just going to be, we're going to end up at a point where either insurance and the costs of natural disasters are going to become so high that, people are either going to lose, they're finally going to go, okay, I guess it's true. Or, we're going to have to go to governments having to bail out people over and over and over again. And right now, governments see the trend. They're like, we need to get out of these disaster assistance programs because, like, no one's happy. You have an event, And people, you try to help them, and it's never good enough. It's like they want everything to be back to the way it was.
Well, let's paint a picture for people, because I do think people's imaginations just aren't there to carry them through this. I mean, that,
Yeah.
let's face it, people don't, for some reason, they were okay with it for about 10 years. Now all of a sudden people hate the carbon tax. They want to get rid of it. So fine, they do away with that, and it allows industry to just kind of go hog wild again. We're going to see more and more of these events throughout the 905, throughout the province, throughout Canada, throughout the world, which will cost billions upon billions of dollars in property damage and potentially lives, God forbid. So you're basically telling me is that at some point, even the insurance companies, the insurance industry is just going to say, nope, we're done. Like, you're like, you can't get flood insurance maybe in the 905, because yeah, we're in the basin of the Niagara Escarpment. All that water's flowing down to us, and we don't have anywhere to stem the flow, because we gave away we took away all the abilities of conservation authorities to do that for us. And we got to build more rich, got to give the Weston family another couple McMansions to live in. Or the Scappers family needs to make another couple $100 million off the Greenbelt. All that's going to happen, but like, at what point though, do we just say suck it up and we keep paying out of pocket, and we pay exorbitant insurance rates, we pay higher costs of this, we become a part of the country that we're not able to move out of, because somebody wants to buy a house that might be flooded the next year? Like, what do we do to solve this, other than, because everybody says we need to mitigate it, we need to take steps to adapt to it, but I want to know what exactly that does that adaptation look like. Do we just give up on certain parts of the country, or do we just say, guess what, we're doing without a new hospital this year because we need to build levees, or we need to build a new reservoir to absorb water? Like, what exactly does this look like if we don't take action?
Well, I mean, right now, one of the tools that some provincial governments have deployed is, when you have multiple flooding events in the same area, they've basically said they offer a strategic retreat. It's called strategic retreat. So they basically offer to buy the home for a set amount. It's usually around 250,000. So if you have a McMansion on the lakefront, that may be a bit of an issue for you. But unfortunately, a lot of river flooding, people forget that there's two different kinds of flooding. There's river flooding, which happens when rivers overflow. And then there's pluvial flooding, which happened in Toronto, where a deluge of rain just comes from above and it overwhelms the storm sewer systems, which are separated, and then all the shit and the stuff gets mixed together, and it drives up through your sewer, in your home. So there's strategic retreat. I mean, I think strategic retreat's going to actually happen without someone's choice, because as we can see, as the coastal areas start to rise with the melting of the Arctic and the rising sea levels, there's going to be parts of this country that are going to be inhospitable. So that's going to happen naturally. But I mean, people just need to, I think the best tool to me would be education and knowledge. So so say you're in a new development, right? Like, say you're buying a home in a new development, like being able to sort of like have a portal or somewhere to go that says, look, this area is, going to be prone to flood risk, or, or even a house that you buy, like this home will, is at risk for a 1 in 25 year flood, right? And then making that transparent so that you root, I know that sounds awful, and people are gonna suffer an equity issue there. Like, like looking in the States, people are still building on the coast. It's crazy how many people are building on the coast, when like in 50 years, all that area is going to be underwater. It's insane. But I think that kind of like where we need to go is like give people the tools to educate themselves, another issue that like we see what's coming as an industry. So what we've done is we proposed to the federal government something that's already in existence in other countries, United States, England. It's called a public-private flood insurance program. So, across this country, there's 10% of the population cannot even get flood insurance. Like there's just no, the insurers just will not offer it. So we're trying to get the government on board. We've committed to it. We'll start, but they haven't actually seeded the funding to make this program a reality. We're ready to deliver it as an industry because we feel like, everybody should have access to flood insurance for their financial resilience, but we can't be expected on our own to offer it when all the data that we collect data. Like we have maps, we use maps. They're not maps that we share, they're proprietary, but we use that. Our industry uses that when they set premiums. And the other thing is, remember that premiums are a pool, right? You're pooling your premiums, right? And at some point, people in that pool are going to complain that the other people, the certain amount of people in that pool are withdrawing all the time, and that they're basically paying to support people who are, not accepting reality, are not taking or living in a part of the city where the municipality is not doing anything to mitigate the flood risk. And people are gonna get upset. And I don't know, like that's kind of like, I think we're at that sort of apex of the existential crisis here, is where people, when it starts hitting people in the wallets, they wake up. That seems like it's the only way you can get someone to wake up, is when it costs them something, right?
Well, that does work, but my worry is when it starts hitting people in the wallet, as we're seeing right now, it's easy to say, let's blame this guy over here, the guy with the good hair, so to speak, for the cost of things going up. And it may be true or not, but it's easy just to kind of point fingers at somebody or someone, and say it's their fault, even if it's devoid from reality and it's devoid from the facts on the ground. But it's a good way to get elected in the office. And once you get elected in the office, well, I don't, the hard work of actually governing, well, screw that. I'll just go pick on a new group of people to blame, put all my woes on.
Yeah,
That's just a rant. That's not a.
well, yeah, no, but I mean, like, think about it. Like, how can we have governments in Canada or political parties in Canada who do not adopt or do not accept climate change? I mean, like, how can we have a provincial government that gutted conservation authorities, put out a Ontario flood strategy that it hasn't done anything with, and is basically, all full steam ahead on paving over more farmland? I mean, we're losing, hundreds of acres of farmland every day to sprawl, and that's all going to flow down. It's going to create more concrete. It's going to create more, like, it's okay to develop. Like, I'm not anti-development. We should, of course we need to develop, but we need to develop with new standards. And when I talk to developers, I have friends in the development community, and nobody's standing up. I say to them, like, there are standards available right now through the Canadian Standards Association that have been developed for flood mitigation for new developments. And when I talk to them, they're like, yeah, it's going to cost too much, or it's going to add cost to the price of a home, so we're not willing to do it. And they're basically, they are not innovators. They don't want to accept. The development community, for the majority, is not on board, and they should be the leaders in this. They should be driving this conversation, and they need to make the business case to people, right? That, look,
are there things that, say, the insurance industry can do now that to kind of put pressure on homeowners and developers to do the right thing? So it's like, for instance, do you have, I mean, this is a poor example because it's not that widespread practice, but for instance, there was a phase where people would, like, literally pave over their front gardens and put down astroturf or park a car in it. It's like, well, okay, you can do that if you want, but you're going to pay more insurance now because you've just covered up a big chunk of land that can absorb water. I mean, is that something that the insurance industry can actually look at? Say, look, be a good citizen and you'll get a better insurance rate.
Well, I think that's going to happen naturally. I think that, it with everything right now, the insurance industry, because of the economy and, the insurance industry makes money two ways. One is through underwriting and one is through investment income. The investment income and we can only, the industry can only make money through very rigid investment vehicles like bonds, basically. Like it's amazing how many people don't understand how much municipal and provincial and federal bonds are backed by the insurance industry, but that's another story. But I mean, I think because right now, because of climate change, because of these rising nat cat events, you're going to have insurers that are going to look way more closely at what they're underwriting. We see this all the time in other lines of business, be it commercial or other, because of mounting costs. And there's gonna be a scrutiny, and there's gonna be higher, attention to what they're actually underwriting, and the people that don't take actions, very simple steps to mitigate flood around your home, to in wildfire zones, to mitigate wildfire, like those that aren't, like, I can see like them sending out people physically looking at a location and saying, and then, there's also some insurers offer incentives, right? They're like, hey, if you install a backwater flow valve in your home, we'll pay half the cost, or we'll give you a break on your insurance rate. Or, even in Alberta right now, Intact is doing a program for their customers where they're actually like going out and helping them make their homes fire smart so that they can avoid fire. So I think it's happening, insurers, like, look, they want to make money. The profit level in the insurance industry is not high. It's not what people think it is. I see the numbers. It's not high. And it's a lot of it's regulated by government, like auto, for example. Like, in Alberta right now, insurers are losing 10 cents for every dollar premium they sell, like, because the government is nuts and they don't know what to
Yeah.
do. But I see your point, and I think that's what's going to happen.
I mean, actually, I mean, the auto industry thing, it's coming from the UK originally. I found it a number of things in Canada bizarre when I arrived. And one of the things I found most bizarre was the idea that you could simply tell insurers to charge less. And it's like, that's not how capitalism works,
I
right?
know, I know.
And yeah, we all hate paying our car insurance. Like, and if you live in a city, it's going to be paying more. But it's not like there isn't competition in insurance. It's
Yeah.
not like there's only one insurance company and they're gouging people. There is actually a lot of competition. I mean, I'm really serving up softballs to you here, aren't I? I mean, this is, but this is the way I've honestly felt over the years. It's like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. If you're taking money away here, they're going to have to get it somewhere else. Or it's, and yeah, cars are really expensive things to insure because people crash them, people steal them. It's a high risk thing for most of us in our lives. It's one of the more high risk things that we have. So it always seemed really bizarre. And then you've got conservative governments, so-called champions of capitalism and business, saying, yeah, we're going to set that rate for you. I know, like I say, that's the most softball question I could ever give to someone who works in the insurance.
But it isn't, because I think you raise a really interesting point, and this brings me back to what we're seeing in California right now. Insurers are not obligated to provide coverage, right? I mean, it's a competitive market, and when it's no longer competitive, they pull out. And what you see, like, for example, in California, insurers were not allowed to rate for wildfire, right? In California, like, because the government set a rule that was written in the 1980s that insurers were not allowed to build in wildfire risk into their pricing. Well, what have we seen in California? Wildfire after wildfire after wildfire, loss of life, tons of loss of property. And, so I mean, like I don't know, government should just, I guess because it's auto insurance is mandated, they feel obligated to sort of like, and it's okay. Like, I don't mind them having, some overview of it, but it's the regulatory intervention in the market that really is disastrous, and we've seen it in United States, and the consequences of it all flow back to consumers. So you get regulatory intervention, and then, like in California, they had regulatory intervention in the auto market for 2 years. As soon as it was lifted, premiums went up 30%. So who suffers, right? Who suffers from that? Consumers suffer from that. Let the market do its job. And this is the most important thing. Like, when government intervenes in risk, they are preventing the public from understanding risk because they're babysitting.
Well, I was just thinking. I mean, that law in California, what will that have done? That means that people are not going to be putting in place those sensible things they do to mitigate fire risk, because they don't need to.
Right.
Why would they? Yes, you're hiding the reality from people when you do that. If car insurance in the 905 is expensive, it's probably there's a reason. There's a reason for that. There's a lot of car theft. Cars are expensive things, et cetera, et cetera. We do. I mean, I'm a fan of the government regulating capitalism because it has to, because unregulated capitalism, well, it's like we see in the building market. They're not going to put in the safety features unless they're forced to. However, when it's as blunt as let's set the price, that seems a bad way to do things. Like, I'm not a fan of rent control either, and I'm someone who was renting until very recently. Well, it what it does is creates an artificial market that ultimately is going to drive, if you're controlling the profits that people can make, then there's not going to be profit, and people are just going to leave in droves and not build rental accommodation and so on and so forth. We're going way off topic here, but it seems that this is kind of, again, people are like, well, we've got to get away from this thing that I don't like paying insurance, therefore the insurance system is wrong.
Right.
It's like, no, you're paying for the risk that you're taking.
Yeah.
If you want lower insurance, take smaller risks.
Yeah. It's funny because, for the first time in a long, like, that I can remember, regulators across the country, FISRA in Ontario, Canadian Council of Insurance Regulators, which represents all the regulators in the country, are starting to inquire about the unregulated property insurance market. And, this is a big concern for our industry because, we rely on capital. A lot of the capital that comes into this country is coming from the UK or other parts, right, of the world. Like, we don't have enough capital in Canada to provide the insurance coverage that we need. So we rely on other markets to invest in this country. When you start to regulate something like property market, that's going to spook a lot of that capital, and they'll go where there's less resistance in that market. So this is really weird. We're a little bit perplexed as an industry why the regulators are, and part of it, I think, is that everybody's starting to realize that, the insurance crisis, that Canada is becoming a riskier place to insure. And it's like governments, bureaucrats want to, do something to control that. But it doesn't make any sense because, like, it's counterintuitive to the whole idea that, like what you just said, like, I buy insurance based on the risks that I face. If the government's going to tell me that I don't need to worry about that, and that they're going to just regulate the price, two things are going to happen. One, no one's going to accept the reality of climate change and the impact of natural disasters. And two, insurance companies are going to say, see ya, bye-bye, and then you're going to end up with all of this is going to be ended up putting on the backs of our governments, because where else does it go? Where else does the protection gap go? So it goes back to government. So governments are going to have to finance, and this is what we're seeing in the States. Like, this is such a dangerous road to have, and you're going to see, like, this, like, I don't want to be overly alarmist, okay, but we are on the precipice of probably what's going to be one of the worst hurricane seasons we've seen in a long time. And I know people think hurricanes, Florida, East Coast, hurricanes can hit Ontario too. Hurricanes can hit Quebec. If the the NOAA predictions are right, and with the movement from into a La Nina conditions where we see more moisture in the air, we have a warm Gulf, like, we could see incredible losses already. And even Beryl alone was, while it wasn't like didn't impact North America as bad as Mexico and other parts, like it was still a significant loss event. So, the water's coming, people. It's coming, and hurricanes are only going to get more prevalent and stronger, and they're going to bring more water, and there's going to be more damage. So I just warn everybody that, like, do what you can to talk to your broker. That's the best thing I would say to anybody is have a conversation with your broker. Make sure you're insured, because I know that more and more people are buying up a flood endorsement policy on their insurance, which means it's working, right? Which means, people are recognizing it and stuff like that. There was a new KPMG survey that came out today that talked to, C-suite and business leaders in Canada, and I found these stats, again, business has a lot of weight, right, with government and policymakers and decision makers, right? And 57% say they have been impacted by a climate change driven event. 57%. Then they go down, they went down and they said that the profitability was affected. 56%. 50% said they lost productivity. 40%, 7% said it impacted their supply chains. So, I mean, this isn't just a homeowner issue. This is a business issue, because when these rainstorms, the insurance claims from businesses from the Toronto event and the Burlington and all the areas that were hit, going to be large claims related to business interruption, business loss, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, the local mall here. Someone was at the local mall the other day, and literally like a river flowing through the stores.
Drake's Mansion.
That's got to be, there's probably $1 million right there, right? With every store in the place getting new carpets.
Yeah.
I mean, it adds up quick, and but I mean, there is also the I guess there's also the possibility. I mean, I was just looking at the local kind of creeks and storm drains and things just in the wake of this, and noticed that the very, what I've always thought was a very pretty little creek with lots of wildflowers and bulrushes, and it's like, oh, great for wildlife. And it's like, actually, what I'm looking at is a blocked up storm drain. I mean, I would assume that, we can't always ask the insurance industry, say, to bail us out for things that, well, so the city's not been maintaining its storm drains. The city, if a business gets flooded, they're going to be looking to their lawyers to get some kind of redress, aren't they?
Yep. Yeah, I heard that's already happening in Burlington. I've heard there's some people that were flooded a second time who are now looking at legal action against, and that is also happening. And again, guess what? Who does that cost?
Oh, it's coming back to you guys.
It comes back to everybody, right? I mean, like, there's no imaginary pot of money here where, somebody pays for all this stuff. And so it's going to, and, municipal, like, here's another thing, like, municipal insurance rates have been going up as well, because, again, municipalities are much riskier places to insure. And this flood risk, all the risks that are inherent in community are all, part of how, the insurance policy is structured. And then you see story after story of municipalities saying, we're going to have to raise our budgets, being impacted by an increase in our municipal insurance rates. And you're just like, they never tell the story that goes with that, because we're a riskier place to insure. We haven't done all the work that we need to make our community safer, blah, 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 blah. Everybody points the finger at the insurance industry. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, market signals. Like these are market signals. What more do you need? And I say this to people who are smart and educated and, who are, wealthy, who watch the markets, who understand the markets. How do you ignore this market? How do you ignore this market?
Well, I guess it comes down to is, like you just said, Mark, who's going to pay for this? I kind of want to bring it back a bit to, we see online comments of the carbon tax, what a waste of money that is, and that's not going to solve any of it. And or it just causes my grocery bill to go up. And I wonder, okay, clearly public doesn't want to go down that route or any kind of exclusive public funds going into climate change solutions uh, for whatever reason. But the simple fact is the private insurance industry is taking this seriously. They are putting their resources into it, and they're trying to mitigate their costs because they see it coming. And I'm wondering if we just hand over all of our climate change prep work, incentivize all that, we just say the insurance companies, let's hand over to your industry to take care of it. What does that look like for the average Ontarian consumers? Because again, it's people think, well, I'm going to buy out flood insurance. I wonder, yeah, but there were people here in Burlington who have been flooded out 2 or 3 times. They never had to buy insurance beforehand. This was never on. They've lived in their houses for, like, they're elderly people who have lived in their house for many, many decades. They've never had to before. And now we're saying, now you got to go buy flood insurance, only to find insurance company saying, no, you're right in the crosshairs of this stuff. We're not touching you with a 10-foot pole. And what does this look like if our governments are going to shirk their responsibility to kind of make the investments in infrastructure or development changes? I'm not talking necessarily like a carbon tax. I'm talking like actual laws and policies. They just say, no, forget it. What can you kind of paint a picture for us? Like what does the average Ontarian consumer look like in, say, maybe the next 10 years?
Well, I think you're going to see a ton of pressure on property insurance rates. I don't think, and it's going to get to a point where it's going to become a government issue. And this is why I talked earlier about, my fear of government intervention in the market. So, I think you're going to see insurance rates for property are going to continue to increase based on risk. You're going to see people who live in homes that are in high risk areas who are not going to be able to get insurance. Often there's often a demographic there of people who can't afford. It's one thing to live on on the waterfront and in $1 million mansion where your insurance policy is just a pocket change to you, right? But to a senior on fixed income or someone who lives in an area that's now going to be further impacted by flood, they don't have the resources to pay a higher premium on insurance policies. Like they're going to move out of, the one thing is as people make claims, right, the pool is going to shift, right, and the pool is going to keep people in there that are at one level of risk, and then another pool is going to be created with another level of risk, and I think that's where we're going to get. We're going to actually have to get to a point where like people are going to be put into a pool and there are going to be limited resources in that pool. And that's why, again, why we're pushing for this national flood insurance program, because I think this is kind of, like a watershed moment for where the industry is trying to say to the government, look, this is an unfunded protection gap. And we care about financial resilience. That's what our product is built on. As much as people complain about it, people hate us when they pay it, but they love us when they need it, right? And we've been working on this for decades, warning the government. It's not just flood risk, it's earthquake risk, not in Ontario, but in BC and Quebec. There's a large earthquake risk there, and it's unfunded. Like it could destroy the Canadian economy. A large earthquake in British Columbia could have a ripple effect cascading across the country, which would put our economy in a negative position. So all these things, like do the math, like, we need government leadership that's willing to kind of like, I don't know, come in and, re-election be damned. I'm just going to make tough choices right now. We are going to, change the narrative here. We are going to, make investments that are needed. And if people vote me out after that, so be it. But at least, we need more of that courage, like we remember in Toronto,
It's,
they had that whole rainfall tax debate, and it all got, whoa, we can't do that. We can't do that. John Tory shut it down. And, today, a lot of people are asking questions about how that kind of tax could have made a difference in investments in infrastructure. So these are tough decisions, right? But like working together, we try to work with governments, right? We try to work with them. We try to give them the information that they need to make the right choices. We try to incentivize adaptation. Our industry's coming up with different products like, green bonds, where, they'll front municipality an investment that'll make savings over the long term in insurance, in people's insurance rate. But we don't have, no one's, I don't know, like we keep putting solutions in front of people and they're not taking them up because they're in denial.
I mean, I used the phrase a while back in a podcast that we treat voters like spoiled children.
Yeah.
The modern politicians are in the business of never telling anybody something that they don't want to hear. So as a result, which is why we always say that politicians are dishonest. They're not actually usually dishonest. They just want to tell you what you want to hear when you want to hear it. So they're going to downplay the stuff you don't want to hear and upplay the stuff you do. And what we really, really, really need is for politicians to tell people what they need to hear,
Yeah.
which is, we have a climate problem. How are we going to pay for it? You're going to pay for it. Like the fact that you're going to pay for it is not in doubt. This money is going to need to be paid. This price of climate change is going to have to be paid. What's your choice? Do you want to pay it in tax? Do you want to pay it in higher insurance rates? Or do you want to pay it when the water comes into your basement? Make your decision now. And to give people like real choices and real decisions rather than this bullshit dialogue that we have. Well, it's not even a dialogue in modern politics, which is basically to pat the voter on the back and say, hey, you can have lower taxes, you can have everything you ever wanted, and guess what? You don't need to pay for it either, which is just a lie. It's the big lie, and it's why the faith in politics is at an all-time low, I think. Yeah, I mean, that's really, I mean, you talked about leadership. That's really what leadership is. It's like, here's the actual decision that is being made. Here's the cost. What do you want to do about it? But that's not how we deal with the electorate in this country, or actually I think anywhere in the Western world.
Roland, doesn't have to be overwhelming. I mean, I'm not talking about like, this isn't like, an economic crisis going to break every municipality. It's just it's about, leadership that accepts the risk that their community faces and is willing to make the non-sexy investments in adaptation to mitigate that for the people that pay taxes, that live in their community, that vote for them. I mean, really, this is about, doing the hard work of the right thing. And it's not like, FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, has put out report after report after report about the infrastructure gap in this country. And, sometimes I think, when you read that, it's easy to just throw your hands up in the air and say, we're never going to catch up. Like, we're so far behind, like, but, we can catch up. We just need to start. Like, we just need to start. And, yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. And the good thing is that the insurance industry is still there. It's still going to help people. It's a great financial tool, pooling of resources to help people in their time of need. It's not going anywhere. And it can only, get better, but like, take the steps, like, let's go, like, like, just take the steps, have a bold plan, and then really, really think about development, like, be more, and what I don't like, I think what's happened in Ontario now is that the provincial government's really becoming before it was like, let municipalities make decisions on developing their own community as long as it adheres to the official plan of the province. Now it's like, we will tell thou where these houses will be built. And typically, you follow the trail of money. It's usually some wealthy PC donor who's made all kinds of donations, who's been speculating on a piece of land for years and wants to cash out. And there's no, municipality loses control. Like, we look at the urban boundary decision in Hamilton, like that was a big watershed moment. People were like, no, we're done. No more sprawl. And then what happens is the government starts overruling municipal decisions. So, I mean, we need all governments working in kind of like tandem. And that's just not happening. We have, two levels of government that blame one level of government for all of their problems, whether they're related to them or not. And then we have, a federal government that can't seem that, pushing its weight around, trying to, go around provinces, and it's created there's nobody, we're not rowing in the same direction. We've got, people rowing in different directions, and that means we're going nowhere. So on this issue, on climate.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll have to leave it at that because I think we're coming up on our time.
Yep.
But we're yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be probably having another conversation with you probably in a few months' time, or maybe this time next year. This might become an annual thing about flooding in the 905, and then we wring our hands. So what can we do about it? And then we'll have another episode where people are complaining about higher insurance rates, and we'll be saying, "See, we told you so."
I was just going to say, this is the episode we're going to replay, in years to come. It's like, we told you so.
Oh,
we were right. Should have listened to us.
Yeah. This is that's what we're going to frame this episode. Just so you know, we told you so.
Yeah.
But thanks very much, Mark, for taking your time to come on today.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Roland.
And we'll talk later. Bye-bye.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Bye.
See you guys.